Welcome back to Indie Author Blueprint, the podcast where we unpack everything we need to know about self-publishing your book like a pro. I'm Michelle Rayburn, and today we're continuing our discussion on interior formatting, and we're going to be talking about polishing the details. Last time we covered the basics, fonts, margins, and paragraph styles, and there was a bonus episode that went into detail with some of the common mistakes that people make. In this episode, we're diving into some of the finer points of formatting that can bring your book from good enough to truly professional. We're talking about running headers and footers, how and when to include a table of contents, and the all-important front and back matter. Even if you're hiring someone else to do the book formatting, you're going to need to be familiar with the terminology so you can direct the process and know what to ask for. Now, I'm going to be talking about a lot of things that are very visual because we're looking at the formatting and how a book looks. And we're specifically talking about print book formatting. So in addition to this free podcast episode, there is a bonus video for paid subscribers that you can watch where I opened a finished PDF file that is ready to go for printing. And I walked through some of those elements pointing with the cursor so you can see with my commentary what some of those page elements are. And you can see an example of one that is finished and ready to go. So that is available. There will be a link in an email for the paid subscribers. If you're not yet a paid subscriber and you sign up, you do get access to all the back content. It goes out in an email, but it also lives on Substack behind a paywall. And so you have access to all the tutorials that we have already gone through since the launch of Indie Author Blueprint. So I encourage you to do that if you're thinking about publishing a book. You'll get all that bonus content and you can watch the video. All right, so let's get started. We're talking about running headers and footers. Now, these are the details that are at the top or the bottom of each page, and they're essential for guiding readers through your book while maintaining a polished look. So I've noticed that some self-published books skip the running headers. And I think it's mostly because they're formatting in Word, and they find it complicated to try to get the spreads correct or to get them, get the headers removed on blank pages. They don't know how to, make all the page breaks and things that have to happen. And so this is why Word is never ideal as the formatting platform, no matter what people say. It's better to use a design software that allows you to tell each individual page whether it should have headers or not on them. And for headers on a fiction book, it's going to look different from nonfiction. So on nonfiction, you'll have the book title on one side and the chapter title on the other. In each chapter, that chapter title changes. And then for the footers, it's going to have page numbers. Those are non-negotiable. In a fiction book, you will have the book title on one side and the author's name on the other, and that stays the same through the whole book. So it's a different level of design, and obviously there are page numbers on those as well. But they're typically done in a really simple style for nonfiction or for fiction, versus nonfiction could get even kind of creative in how the page numbers and the formatting are done. So when you want to look at examples, go ahead and flip through some of the books that you have on your shelf and see what some of the best practices are that they're doing. Number one, keep it uncluttered. Avoid cramming too much information into the header or the footer. So simplicity is the key. Now, there are some times when it's a little bit complicated, and so you have to do it a little different, but always trying to keep it simple in whatever you're doing. Placement matters. Page numbers are typically put in the footer, but not always. I've done some now where I really like to have them in the top on some things if the bottom of the page is going to have some other stuff happening there. And your page numbers and your headers could be centered or they could be at the outer edge. It doesn't really matter. Sometimes they have the title and then there's a vertical pipe, or that's a vertical slash or something similar that divides the page number from the title. I've seen all of that and put in the footer, which is kind of common on some textbooks. So look at other things in your genre and see what they're doing for placement. Typically with fiction, it's those headers at the top, page numbers at the bottom, and that's it. And like I said, it's the nonfiction where we get a little creative. Use a smaller font when you're doing those headers and footers. Don't have them be ginormous. You don't want them to draw attention away from the content. They're just there to help people navigate. So like I said, in the fiction, you might have the author's name and the book title, and that's it. There are some times when I choose not to include chapter titles on nonfiction. For example, a book with a lot of short chapters, like a devotional, where there's only 1 to 3 pages or something. And it's like so rare, there's probably going to be 10 times in the whole book where I would even need the right-hand side header. And like, why bother make those the chapter ones? So it will just be the author's name throughout the whole thing sometimes with that. I try to just go on the as needed basis when I'm deciding on something that's an exception. In that case, if it's divided into sections, I might actually make the section be the heading on one side so that people can find it by topic. But again, I'm deciding on a case-by-case basis on that. The second thing that's part of your formatting for your book is a table of contents. Now, the table of contents can actually be generated automatically in some software, and it will even calculate the page numbers for you based on if you've marked your chapter title pages, or you might have to manually do it. But if you're manually doing it, make sure that your titles of your chapters actually match the titles in the book. I've seen some people have them, they edit one or the other and they forget to edit the other one. So that's important. Not every book needs a table of contents. So this is definitely important for nonfiction, and it's important for an ebook. But in nonfiction, it gives the reader an overview of the content and helps them jump to specific sections. So that table of contents tells them those chapter titles. And for fiction, I add a table of contents only in the ebook because they're usually numbered, but you still need those chapter numbers to show up on the table of contents in an ebook because of how an e-reader navigates. So I will add it for navigation purposes in that ebook, but there is no table of contents in a novel when I'm doing the print version. And the other thing about the table of contents is sometimes people will want to include a blurb about each chapter, and I'll tell you why in just a second. So when you're formatting your table of contents, it's going to have the chapter title and its corresponding page number in your print book. And then it's going to have some kind of font and style that's consistent with the rest of the book so it looks cohesive. And then if it's an ebook, those are going to be clickable links because it's going to coordinate with the reader and turn that into a menu. And so that's super important in there. And tools like Vellum or Atticus or KDP Kindle Create will help you to create those as well. And then there have been some times in a nonfiction book where I have included, like I said, a blurb about each chapter with that title. And here's why. It works well because readers can only see a short preview of a book on Amazon, and they don't get to see what the book is really about. And if I'm writing nonfiction and I want them to know what topics I'm covering in future chapters, I think it helps them to make a buying decision if I've included a little blurb, a line or two, about each chapter along with those chapter titles. And so that's why I do it, because that will show up on the look inside the book and it will help them to make those decisions about buying that book. The table of contents goes near the beginning of your book, after the copyright, and usually after the dedication pages. This way it doesn't interrupt your flow, but it's easy to find. So the table of contents is part of the front matter. It might be one page with the blank on the back, or it might take several pages. Sometimes it takes 4 pages if it's a long book with a lot of sections. So it just depends. There's no rule for how long that contents page is going to be. And I generally now label it just contents. I don't write table of contents, but sometimes people still write out table of contents. Now, that's in the front matter. Let's talk about front matter and back matter. This is a term that has to do with the things that come in the front of the book before your main content and in the back of the book after your main content. So let's look at what that includes. When you're publishing, you write the pages and format them. So you have to decide on the order. And if someone else is designing, you want to give it to them in the order you want it to appear. And so there are pieces that are part of that book. And this is what I go into some examples of in the video that I did, so you can see where they are in the book and what they look like. The half title page comes at the very beginning. You might have some endorsements and then the half title page, or the half title and then the endorsements, but that is only the title. And then you have a title page, and that is the book title, the subtitle, your name as the author, and the publisher name. And there's usually a blank page in between those on the back side of the half title. And then there's the copyright page on the back side of the title. And that one you'll see again in the video example that I created. And so that one should have the copyright notice, the publisher information, any disclaimers, ISBN details, and it should, if you're writing a Christian book, include the Bible copyrights. You need to have a copyright statement for the versions of the Bible that you used. If you are writing a book that has like a reference that you're using a lot, like an encyclopedia or something, you can also mention that there. Disclaimers I mentioned, that would be like, this is not intended for medical advice, that kind of thing. Then if your book has a dedication, that goes in the front. And then acknowledgments might be in the front or they might be in the back. If it's really short, they might go in the front. If it's really long, they tend to go in the back. Where you put the acknowledgments is up to you. But again, before typesetting, decide where they go. And you're going to be the one writing that copyright page. You're going to be the one that's writing up these acknowledgments when you're self-publishing. So make sure that you write them the way you want them to appear. And then the table of contents we've mentioned. Now in the back matter after the main content, could include those acknowledgments. It could include an about the author. It would be a longer version of your bio. So you might have a really short one on the back cover and have something more in depth in here. You might have other books you've published or a series, or you can promote upcoming titles. You might have an index if it's nonfiction. You might have page numbers and key topics, maybe an appendix with bonus content that you've mentioned in the book for people to find. You might have discussion questions in the back. And then you might have a call to action like join my list or follow me on social media, anything that is extra info for the reader. Some people give a sample of their next book, like the first chapter. So it's up to you what you put there, but that is a rundown of the front and the back matter. And you don't want to overwhelm readers, but you want to have enough to enhance their experience there. Now, there are some extra design elements as we wrap up today that can make your book stand out a little bit and give it some personality and uniqueness. And so these touches might not be essential, but they can make it stand out. So drop caps, those are those big capital letters at the starting of a chapter or a section. So it might be a decorative letter or just a bigger version of the font of the sentence. And so that complements your book's design. The other thing that might be included there is what's called a nested style. And that just means maybe the first 5 words of that paragraph have a different font or a different look to them. You'll notice some are in small caps or they're in a different style font. And that might be what happens after a section break inside the book too, where there's a scene break. There might be in a fiction book, you might notice that all of a sudden after that scene break, there's not much there, but there's a little space. And then the first 5 or 6 or whatever words of that paragraph start with another font. And that's called a nested style. So that's just something that is decided on by a book's designer to make it look unique. You might choose to use sidebars. These are really good for nonfiction. So a sidebar or a pull quote is another example. A sidebar can highlight quotes, maybe tips or bullet points, kind of like, think like a magazine article sidebar where it's like just giving you a little extra content. A pull quote might actually be a quote from within the paragraph that stands out. And so it makes, just kind of breaks up the page a little bit and really grabs the attention of the reader. And so when you have that pull quote there, it just makes it so you don't just have pages and pages of text. You might use unique headings. You might have customized chapter headings, some images that kind of like a watermark that bleeds off the page behind the title to make it interesting. Or your section titles might have something visually engaging, like they're graphically designed a little bit more than just a regular subheading. You might have special fonts for inserts, like if your book has letters or journal entries or distinct elements, maybe you're going to set that apart with like a gray box or special fonts. And I work with authors who have a lot of fancy content sometimes, and we figure out ways to incorporate that. You might have some illustrations in there. You might have an epigraph, which is a short quote that sets the tone for a chapter. It could be a Bible verse, or it might be a quote from a famous person. It might be some back info, like the date that something happened. And so I'll show you some examples of that in the video that I made, just to show you what that looks like. There are some other ways that you can graphically represent things, like instead of traditional page numbers, you might do drop folios. Like in the footer, they might be in the outer margins, so they're a little bit more modern looking, like they're just not aligned inside the box of text or centered in a traditional way. And then how you fine-tune hyphens is another way that when you're adjusting those settings, it's going to make your paragraphs look smoother and ensure a smooth reading experience. And so those are all those little touches that you're looking at. It's not just plopping the text in and then moving on. So these small touches, when you do use them intentionally, can elevate the visual appeal of your book, and they can enhance the reader's experience, and they can make the book feel pretty or make it feel academic, or they really set a tone in addition to just the text on the page. So just like last time, I want to share a few tools that can simplify these processes. I'll link in the show notes. Vellum is a tool that you can use if you're on Mac. Atticus is one that you can use on Mac, or if you're on a PC. There's KDP Kindle Create, Adobe InDesign. There are others, but these are just some examples of from simple to more complicated, some of the tools that are out there for typesetting. And if you're unsure about your formatting, just hire a professional. Have them do it. You're going to have peace of mind. It's not going to cost you that much. They're going to spend some time getting it right, but it's just so much easier than hours and hours of frustration when you can be doing something else. You can be working on getting ready to market your book while somebody else is doing that typesetting. So yes, you can do it yourself, but there are many people who later wish they hadn't. So be one of those people who weighs that out carefully. So as we wrap up, let's do a little recap. Using running headers and footers can polish your book and help navigation. Having a table of contents is important. Organizing your front and back matter helps your reader's experience, promotes your brand, helps people connect with you. And then those extra design elements like drop caps, sidebars, unique fonts are what make your book truly stand out. So we're going to be talking then in the future about the next steps in publishing. So this wraps up our introduction to formatting. And so next time we're going to move into a new topic. We're continuing to walk through all of the different elements that are related to publishing a book. And then as we have time, I'll come back and really go into depth on some specific things. We're covering all these basics first. So I hope you enjoyed this episode. If you did, please leave a review. If you haven't subscribed as a paid subscriber, it's only $8 a month, and you get access to all the stuff I've made, including the free video that goes with today and the bonus episode I made last week. So I encourage you to do that. There are other bonus episodes and content, but that was the one in this series. I want to thank you for listening to Indie Author Blueprint, and I hope to see you again next week.